Good afternoon, colleagues. If you can all please settle in, we would like to start off our meeting. Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I trust you all had enjoyed the side events that have been taking place and also the lunch break. So the meeting is called to order. We would continue with agenda item 2, and we have been listening to country statements. Just a reminder that in addition to the speaking requests that have already been received, delegations still wishing to take the floor may do so by raising their flags. Conference room officers will take note of those requests and include them in the list of speakers. So we carry on with the country statements, and by coincidence, the first on my list is Bangladesh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished panelists, delegates, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. The second Asia-Pacific Regional Review of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration marks a pivotal moment in our collective journey towards achieving the objectives of the GCM and ensuring the protection and empowerment of migrants across our region. Migration and mobility are inseparable aspects of our interconnected world. Over the past years, we have witnessed significant progress in implementing the GCM, driven by the unwavering commitment of all member states and partners. Bangladesh's active engagement in the GCM is notable, including reiteration its commitment through the pledging initiative at the International Migration Review Forum in 2022. As the sixth migrant sending nation globally and the eighth highest recipient of remittance, the country remains steadfast in aligning migration governance and management with sustainable development objectives, especially in addressing the socio-economic impact of remittance, skills development, and climate-induced displacement. Bangladesh has made significant strides in implementing GCM since being recognized as champion in 2020, given its proactive role in promoting safe, orderly, and regular migration. The country has developed and implemented policies to protect the rights of migrants, ensuring their access to basic services and decent work conditions. The government is actively working on preparing its National Action Plan for implementing GCM. This plan will be instrumental in aligning our national strategies with the GCM objectives, ensuring a comprehensive approach to migration governance. In addition, Bangladesh has also strengthened policy reform for strengthening diaspora engagement and reintegration for returnees, exploring new avenue to ensure migration remains as an accelerator for development. Bangladesh recognizes that migration has a multifaceted nature. The government launched a dedicated Bangladesh Migration Compact Task Force to facilitate the implementation, follow-up and review of GCM objectives as its whole-of-government approach for migration governance. Bangladesh actively collaborates with the Bangladesh UN Network on Migration and its technical working groups to coordinate for GCM-related initiatives and broader migration-related interventions. Besides, the country has strengthened regional cooperation and partnerships to address migration challenges and optimize the benefits of migration. Special efforts have also been made to enhance data collection and analysis to inform migration policies and ensure evidence-based decision-making. Despite these achievements, we recognize the challenges remain, especially given the mixed narrative of migration. With a population where nearly two-thirds are young, Bangladesh faces the challenge of tailoring education and skills to meet current and future needs. The evolving job market requires young people to continuously adapt, reskill, and embrace new attitudes and positive perceptions. As we strive for zero poverty and zero unemployment, we must prioritize safe, orderly, and regular migration as our development tool. Migrants have been playing a catalytic role in advancing sustainable development in their countries of origin, transit, and destination. Migrant workers as development agents fill labor market gaps as well as bring innovation and improve business practices in the destination countries. Despite their immense contribution, migrants continue to face discrimination, xenophobia, stigmatization, and exploitation in many parts of the world. A right-based approach with focus on migrants' health security, social protection, housing, education, jobs, and livelihood security, as well as sustainable reintegration, where return is of absolute necessity, is of paramount importance. Bangladesh underlines that IOM should continue to play a greater role towards promoting migrants' right for ensuring safe, orderly, and regular migration. Bangladesh continues to prioritize migration in its reform agenda, ensuring that it remains as a driver for development. As we move forward, let us reaffirm our commitment to the principles and objectives of the GCM. Let us work together to build a future where migration is safe, orderly, and regular, and where the rights and dignity of all migrants are upheld. I thank you all.
Thank you, the distinguished delegate from Bangladesh. Sorry, I forgot to alert earlier. The next speaker would be from Sri Lanka, to be followed by Vietnam. Sri Lanka, please.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. So at the outset, on behalf of the Government of Sri Lanka, I wish to express our appreciation to the UN ESCAP and the regional UNMN for Asia and the Pacific for convening this forum, which serves as a vital platform for us to collectively assess the progress made towards achieving the goals that we have set out under the GCM, discuss the challenges, lessons learned, and identify regional priorities, and also better organize our efforts in pursuit of achieving the SDGs. I would also like to extend my appreciation to the IOM for the continuous support extended to the Government of Sri Lanka in convening interministerial and multi-stakeholder conversations on migration governance in the context of GCM and the SDGs. Sri Lanka adopted the GCM in 2018 with the intention of strengthening migration governance by ensuring horizontal and vertical policy coherence across all sectors and levels of the government. For Sri Lanka, implementation of GCM is crucial to protect the safety, dignity, fundamental freedoms of all migrants, both inward and outward, and empower them to be active participants of national development process. GCM implementation will also support the efforts to combat xenophobia, racism, and discrimination towards all migrants, and strengthen good governance of migration leading to sustainable growth. In recent years, Sri Lanka's migration landscape was severely affected by converging crises. Firstly, the COVID-19 pandemic, and then the domestic economic crisis. These converging crises disproportionately affected the vulnerable populations, endangering their access to healthcare, education, decent work, and standard of living. As Sri Lanka emerged from these setbacks and looked towards the future, it is important to work in collaboration with other member states, international organizations, and industry partners to capitalize on cross-border mobility as a frontier of economic recovery and growth. For Sri Lanka, workers' remittances is the single largest source of foreign exchange earnings. It supports Sri Lanka's economic recovery by providing sustainable cushion against the widening trade deficit and enhancing the external sector resilience. Also, it has covered around 80% of annual trade deficit on average over the past 2 decades. Every year, approximately 230,000 to 250,000 Sri Lankan workers leave for foreign employment. So this number increased to 312,000 in 2024 and is expected to reach 340,000 this year. However, on the other side, the risks associated with irregular migration have also increased drastically. This increase has exacerbated migrants' vulnerabilities to irregular migration, human smuggling, human trafficking, and other transnational organized crimes. Economic hardships, lack of awareness, and lack of access to safe labor migration pathways, coupled with skill gaps, contribute to irregular migration. And to add to these complexities, hence, in this juncture, GCM is important than ever in ensuring safe, orderly, and regular migration. I am pleased to mention that we have made significant progress in implementing GCM framework in Sri Lanka. A National GCM Implementation Committee was established in December 2021. So it is co-convened by the ministries in charge of foreign affairs and foreign employment, right now one ministry. 2 subcommittees co-convened by ministries of foreign affairs and foreign employment were formed to support development, implementation, monitoring, and reporting of National GCM Implementation Plan. Following multiple committee meetings, subcommittee convened by Ministry of Foreign Employment identified national priority GCM objectives and prepared the National GCM Implementation Plan in 2022 through a consultative process. The committee identified GCM objectives 1, 3, 6, 10, 11, 18, 20, 21 as priority objectives for Sri Lanka. By following the whole of government and whole of society approach during the formulation process of GCM National Implementation Plan, inputs were welcome from both government and non-government stakeholders, including civil society organizations and academia and UNMN. With the technical assistance from IOM, National GCM Implementation Plan was formulated through this consultative process. In November 2020, the UN country team in Sri Lanka established the UN Network on Migration in Sri Lanka to support the government to implement the GCM framework in line with global UNMN. So we express our thanks to them for assisting us in developing national strategy and action plan on GCM implementation, follow-up and review, and facilitating the active engagement of all relevant entities. The government of Sri Lanka is keen to revisit the national implementation plan and the priority objectives to ensure they remain aligned with the changing environments and trends in the country. And additionally, the government of Sri Lanka plans to revive the National GCM Implementation Committee to further advance the GCM implementation efforts in Sri Lanka, for which we will seek the support of GCM capacity building mechanisms. So finally, we wish to express our commitment to be a GCM champion country. So I thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Sri Lanka for that statement. Now we would hear from Vietnam, to be followed by Lao PDR.
Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, migration is an integral part of the world's socio-economic life and an increasingly important contributor to sustainable development. However, migration is also facing many challenges, requiring enhanced cooperation at all levels to promptly and effectively address, in line with the commitment of the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. Since the first regional review of the implementation of the GCM in 2021 and the International Migrant Review Forum in 2022, Vietnam has continued to make efforts and implement the GCM in accordance with the National Implementation Plan issued in March 2020. We would like to briefly introduce the outstanding achievements over the past 3 years. First, Vietnam continues to improve policy and laws related to international migration, including the 2023 Law on Identity and the Law on Human Trafficking Prevention and Combat, to strengthen efforts in providing legal identity documents to address statelessness and combating human trafficking, given the complex developments in the region due to online scams. Second, Vietnam attaches special importance to collect information and data on international migration to inform evidence-based migration policies. Vietnam published the 2023 Vietnam Migration Profile last October with support of IOM, and is currently developing a centralized information management system on international migration. Third, Vietnam closely cooperates with other countries and partners to expand safe migration pathways, ensure the social security rights of migrants, and migrant health, particularly in labor migration, as this is the predominant type of migration in Vietnam. On December 2021, Vietnam and South Korea signed the agreement on insurance, the first bilateral government-level agreement in this area that Vietnam has signed to ensure the rights and legitimate interests of migrant workers, including the social security rights. However, the implementation of GCM is still facing challenges, including limited resources, complex patterns of human smuggling and human trafficking in the context of online scams, affecting pathway for safe migration, as well as other matters in digital transformations. Vietnam remains committed to continue efforts to promote GCM implementation across the country and the region. We look forward to closer regional and inter-regional cooperation to increase regular and safe migration corridors, reduce migrants' vulnerabilities, and mitigates the risk of abuse and exploitation during migration cycle. We would like to recommend that the UN Migration Network continue to strengthen countries' capacity in implementing the GCM based on their priorities, with a focus on developing strategies to timely address emerging challenges in contemporary international migration. I thank you.
Thank you very much, distinguished delegate of Vietnam. We shall now hear from Lao PDR, to be followed by Uzbekistan.
Thank you, thank you, Chair. At the outset, on behalf of the government of the Lao PDR, I would like to express my profound congratulations to UN ESCAP and IOM for organizing the second Asia-Pacific Regional Review of the implementation of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. The ongoing multifaceted challenges over the past year, including COVID-19 pandemic, geopolitical and trade tension, economic downturn, shortcoming in our financial system, and climate change, among others, have severely impacted our development trajectory. Moreover, these challenges are also fundamental factors of international and domestic migration. Therefore, the government of the Lao PDR places great importance on addressing migration and migration-related issues. We are committed to working with other countries by enhancing cooperation to implement the GCM while upholding the national sovereignty of our member states. Mr. Chair, as LDC and the only LDC country in the region, these challenges impose complexity towards the flow of migration, making the Lao PDR a country of origin, transit, and destination for migration. My delegation shares the view that apart from the increasing level of connectivity, poverty, and inequality, development barriers remain a major driving force for people to migrate in search for better economic opportunity and better livelihoods. Poverty eradication and improving of well-being of the people has always been the utmost priority of the implementation of its 5-year National Socio-Economic Development Plan. Proper migration will contribute to reducing poverty, inequality, and organized crime, including trafficking in persons. In this regard, the UN development system must also play an essential role in assisting the group of countries in special situations, namely LDCs, SIDS, to address their specific development needs. At the national level, the Lao PDR has established the national focal points from Line Ministry to coordinate and implement GCM in early 2024 and has identified 2 objectives, namely number 10 and objective number 23 as the priority of the Lao PDR. In addition, the UN Network on Migration in the Lao PDR has been established to assist the government in implementing the GCM, and the national focal point as well as the network will also continue to discuss to draft the first work plan for the implementation of GCM in the country. In this regard, the Lao PDR has decided to present the first national voluntary report on the implementation of GCM in the International Migration Review Forum in 2026. For the Lao PDR, international technical and financial support, as well as collaboration between stakeholders, remain crucial, particularly in achieving the objectives of the National Socio-Economic Development Plan, advancing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and fulfilling the ambitious goal of graduating from LDC status. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate the Lao PDR firm commitment to enhance cooperation with all member states and support the implementation of GCM. We would like to thank the international community, especially UN ESCAP, UN country team, and IOM and other development partners for valuable and continued support assisting the Lao government in our endeavor towards realization of the national development agendas. And we look forward to further enhancing our partnership for the realization of our National Social Economic Development Plan, as well as the effective implementation of the GCM at the national level. I thank you, Chair.
I thank you, distinguished delegate of Lao PDR. The next speaker is from Uzbekistan, to be followed by Azerbaijan. Uzbekistan, please.
Excellencies, ladies Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Republic of Uzbekistan remains committed to the principles and objectives of Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. Uzbekistan has actively integrated key GSM principles into existing migration-related policies and legal frameworks. One of the big steps on this field was the decision of the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan on measures to implement a system of safe, orderly, and legal labor migration, which sets a new national system in Uzbekistan. This includes measures to improve labor migration governance, protect the rights of migrants, reintegration processes, and enhance international cooperation. The government continues to work on strengthening its institutional capacity in this regard. In October 2024, the Agency for External Labor Migration was transformed into the Migration Agency under the government of Uzbekistan, expanding its mandate and enhancing the effectiveness of migration governance. Uzbekistan acknowledges the importance of IMRF 2022 Progress Declaration and is committed to incorporating its recommendations into national policies and engagements in international fora. Uzbekistan has taken concrete steps to enhance legal pathways for migration, improve skills recognition frameworks, and strengthen protection mechanisms for migrant workers. Uzbekistan is integrating the recommended actions into its national policies by developing fast-track procedures for issuing visas and work permits for labor migrants, strengthening interagency coordination and engaging the private sector in migration governance, expanding digital solutions for migrant registration, monitoring working conditions, and ensuring legal protection. Uzbekistan has also worked to expand its collaboration with international organizations, civil society, and diaspora communities to ensure inclusive migration governance. Uzbekistan has made significant progress in labor migration management, particularly through agreements with key destination countries. The recently concluded agreements with European partners serve as examples of structured, mutually beneficial labor mobility frameworks. Additionally, the introduction of digital platforms to facilitate safe migration has improved transparency and efficiency in migrant recruitment processes. We have established specialized professional and language training centers to equip migrants with skills, knowledge of labor laws, and cultural adaptation programs. In partnership with host countries, we have developed medical insurance and legal support. Despite progress, challenges remain in ensuring comprehensive regional coordination. This includes the need of enhanced data sharing mechanisms, harmonization of skills recognition systems, and stronger cross-border cooperation to combat irregular migration and human trafficking. Additionally, financial constraints and limited institutional capacity pose challenges in fully implementing GSM objectives. Strengthening regional and international partnerships remain crucial to addressing these gaps. Uzbekistan emphasized the needs for increased cooperation in the following areas: creating regional training center for migrants with the support of international organizations to provide certification, skill training, and employment assistance, enhancing dialogue among governments, employers, and recruitment agencies to ensure transparency and fair labor conditions for migrants, improving financial, technical, and policy support mechanisms for capacity building, data collection, and migration policy development. We remain committed to deepening international cooperation on migration issues and look forward to further collaboration with partners to achieve the objectives of GSM. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, distinguished delegate of Uzbekistan. We would now hear from Azerbaijan, to be followed by Papua New Guinea. Azerbaijan.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to address on behalf of the government of Azerbaijan and share the progress that has been made in the implementation of Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. Since becoming one of the first countries in our region to support and joined the GCM, Azerbaijan has consistently demonstrated its commitment to the compact. Azerbaijans' migration policy is in line with the guiding principles of GCM, and today GCM comprises a significant part of migration management in Azerbaijan. State Migration Service of the Republic of Azerbaijan adopted an action plan for 2023-2026 on the implementation of the GCM in Azerbaijan. The plan consists of 58 measures to support the GCM 360-degree approach, and annual reports on its implementation have been prepared. Moreover, as the chair of the Almaty process for 2023-2024 period, Azerbaijan has taken on the responsibility of facilitating the implementation of the GCM within this important regional framework. This includes expanding the knowledge, including on the intersection of climate change and migration, as well as mainstreaming migration into the development policies. We recognize that the effect of climate change intensify migration challenges, and we are working to ensure that climate change adaptation policies address the human mobility dimensions. In this regard, as the chair of 29th session of the Conference of the Parties to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, Azerbaijan used opportunities to reflect on the objectives and guiding principles of GCM during the engagement within the COP process. Azerbaijan's COP29 presidency has also been an important stage for international discussions on complex relationship between the increasing effect of climate change and human mobility. The Baku Guiding Principles on Human Development for Climate Resilience and the Baku Initiative on Human Development for Climate Resilience, adopted within the framework of COP29, recognize migrants as a vulnerable group and lay the groundwork for finding solutions to their needs. The three main COP29 declarations on tourism, water, and sustainable cities also address migration in the context of climate change, stressing the needs for a comprehensive approach to this issue. Through high-level events and partnership with the International Organization for Migration, we have facilitated critical dialogue on how migration can be better managed in response to environmental changes. Azerbaijan's commitment to a whole of society and whole of government approach is evidenced in the various national initiatives we have launched. Particularly, the Public Council, the Advisory Council, and the Migrant Council established under the State Migration Service has ensured active participation of civil society, private sector, and migrants themselves in migration management. The implementation of GCM requires stronger inter- and cross-regional cooperation. To address this, we are advocating for the establishment of regional platforms such as the Regional Training Center on Migration, which can serve as a hub for knowledge exchange, capacity building, and best practices in the implementation of GCM. By strengthening these platforms, we can ensure that the GCM implementation is supported by robust partnership and shared experience. Azerbaijan remains fully committed to advocating GCM principles and objectives. As a champion country, we will continue to collaborate with all stakeholders, government, international organizations, civil society, and the private sector to ensure the safe, orderly, and regular migration. I thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate of Azerbaijan. The next and last so far for country statements on our list is Papua New Guinea.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Chair, thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak in this forum once again. We're joined others to especially thank the organizers, ESCAP and UN Migration Network on Migration for organizing this event, the review. Chairman, it is our firm belief that the review exercise that will be undertaken today and in the coming days will be a resounding success, as is the first review of the compact in March 2018 here in Bangkok. The high-level, broad-based participation in the second review demonstrates the overall commitment by all our stakeholders, and especially the member states, in ensuring that we reaffirm our commitment at the adoption of this compact in 2018. And this compact remains relevant today and into the future. Indeed, the second review is a testament, Mr. Chair, to our collective teamwork, fostered through collaboration under the banner of multilateralism. This ensures that human mobility across our international borders are managed and controlled within the presence of international law and related frameworks that we, all member states, have. Mr. Chairman, when the Global Compact on Migration was adopted in Marrakesh, it not only marks a watershed moment for humanity on the issue of international migration, it also laid the bedrock that fostered international cooperation on addressing migration like never before. The Compact has now become viable, a pathway for international cooperation on important issues. My delegation, Mr. Chairman, our participation here is to be part of that network of people advocating the objectives of the migration. Papua New Guinea is committed to play its part in accordance with domestic laws and policies. We are at the moment going through a review of the migration laws in our country. But we also acknowledge there are many challenges that remain due to the dynamics of migration changes. And Papua New Guinea will continue to make appropriate amendments to our legislations. Before December this year, we hope that we will present a new and revised bill to Parliament to make our new law to accommodate new challenges and to address the objectives of the GCM. But as a developing country, constrained by limited resource capacity, servicing our national laws and policies, and international legal obligations, particularly international migration issues, remains an ongoing challenge. The review should focus on improving areas that ensure capacity of national institutions that manage migration functions with a view to achieve the 23 objectives espoused in the GCM. My country recognizes that certain areas identified in the compact, such as providing all refugees and migrant children with education in transit and in destination, would require us to find innovative ways to address them. We require good partnership with member states and international partners who have the capacity to assist us to fulfill important obligations. Mr. Chairman, as a country that is highly vulnerable to climate change and natural resources, we continue to have pressing consequences on our people's lives and livelihoods, and the importance of, and we wish to see a nexus between migration and climate change, and the importance of mitigation and adaptation requirements of impacts of climate change as it relates to climate change-induced migration. I reiterate, Mr. Chair, that my country is committed to this second regional review, and we look forward to a successful outcome. I thank you.
I thank you, the distinguished delegate of Papua New Guinea. Are there any other governments that wish to take the floor? As I see no other requests from governments. We will now open the floor for interventions from intergovernmental organizations and United Nations entities. The first speaker on our list is the representative of Economic Cooperation Organization.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. Excellencies, distinguished participants, it's an honor to address this distinguished assembly in the second Asia-Pacific Regional Review of Implementation of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration. I also extend my profound gratitude to the International Organization for Migration and the ESCAP for inviting the Economic Cooperation Organization to this event as an observer. Distinguished participants, the Economic Cooperation Organization is an intergovernmental regional entity encompassing a vast territory of over 8 million square kilometers and population exceeding 500 million inhabitants across its 10 member states. In accordance with ECO vision, one of our paramount objectives is to establish regional law enforcement and police mechanism to bolster national, regional, and international efforts in combating illegal drug trafficking, human trafficking, and other forms of trans-regional organized crime. In pursuit of this objective, ECO entered into a memorandum of understanding with IOM in 2009. This MOU seeks to enhance migration management expertise across the 10 ECO member states, all of which are also members of the IOM. Dear participants, migration has perennially been a matter of profound concern for humanity and a central issue on the global policy agenda. It endangers significant economic, social, and cultural implications for both origin and destination countries, rendering it a formidable development challenge for nations worldwide. The economic cooperation, the ECO region is no stranger to the challenges posed by migration. Frequent shifts in political, social, economic, and environmental conditions have rendered the region both a source and a destination for migrants. Notably, Turkey, Kazakhstan, Pakistan, and Iran are the key ECO member states that serve as major destination, transit, and origin countries for migrants. Meanwhile, Afghanistan remains a primary country of origin within the region. Dear participant, building on therefore, in alignment with our vision, ECO and IOM have conducted a workshop to examine the trends and scope of trafficking in persons and human smuggling within the ECO region in 2024. These workshops have highlighted the success stories and best practices, providing invaluable insights into the root causes of migration and offering a new perspectives on addressing trafficking and smuggling, and also our collaboration with IOM.
Distinguished representative from ECO, could you please wrap up? Thank you.
Concluding my speech, I would like to thank all participants and thank you.
Thank you. I thank the distinguished representative of ECO for this statement. He will be followed by the IFRC representative making a joint statement on behalf of the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. IFRC statement will be followed by ILO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegates, thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, which includes 191 national societies and their 17 million volunteers, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, and the International Committee of the Red Cross. While acknowledging progress in implementing GCM commitments, migrants continue to face death, violence, abuse, and exclusion. As humanitarian actors, our movement neither encourages nor discourages migration. However, we do insist that all migrants are treated with dignity and in accordance with the protections afforded to them by law. We wish to highlight 4 areas where stronger efforts are needed. Firstly, we urge states to take action to save lives and prevent migrants from dying and going missing on land and at sea, including through coordinating search and rescue and providing unhindered access for humanitarian services. Secondly, we call upon states to address the barriers preventing migrants from accessing essential services in a safe, dignified, and effective manner. Those barriers include discriminatory laws, policies and practices, prohibitive costs, as well as fear of arrest, detention, or deportation. Thirdly, we ask states to scale up support to people at risk, displaced by disasters and the climate crisis, and to accelerate disaster risk reduction, early action, and preparedness efforts. Lastly, we urge states to review policies that criminalize cross-border movements and avoid detaining people based solely on their immigration status, and to fully commit to ending the immigration detention of children. Our movement's principled humanitarian approach, expertise, and local presence across migration routes means we can play a unique role in fostering complementary implementation of the GCM and the Global Compact for Refugees, and continue to support states in advancing protection and assistance for migrants. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of IFRC. We would now hear from the representative of ILO.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies and distinguished delegates, stakeholder representatives, UN colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to participate today in this regional review. Since the 2021 Asia-Pacific Regional Review, labor migration flows that had been disrupted by COVID-19 at that time have recovered to previous levels. We find that new destinations and pathways are emerging, and also that progress has been made on several fronts to promote, protect, and respect the rights of migrant workers. The GCM's 23 objectives provide a comprehensive approach toward safe, orderly, and regular migration. With your permission, I would like to touch upon 3 thematic areas which are of great importance to the delivery of the GCM in this region. First, on labor mobility. Over the past 4 years, government-to-government coordination to improve opportunities for regular migration has resulted in more regular labor mobility pathways, mainly through bilateral arrangements and temporary labor migration programs. Pathways for regular migration provide a means of authorized movement, provide an enabling environment for migrants to better realize their rights during all stages of migration. Yet some of these regular channels remain costly for many migrant workers, and they are unable to keep pace with employer demand. We urge member states to identify and address existing barriers to safe, orderly, and regular labor mobility, including high migration and recruitment costs, gender discrimination, and non-recognition of skills and qualifications. Migration pathways could be expanded and made more accessible and responsive to the fundamental factors that drive mobility in the region. On fair recruitment, since 2020, countries in this region have adopted stricter enforcement measures to regulate recruitment practices. Bilateral labor migration agreements are increasingly incorporating fair recruitment provisions. Recruitment costs are being monitored as part of national surveys, with 10 Asia-Pacific countries utilizing the ILO World Bank methodology to measure SDG 10.7.1 on recruitment costs. A few South Asian and Southeast Asian countries have adopted digital recruitment and immigration procedures in order to enhance transparency and accountability. Several businesses have established codes of practice on responsible recruitment. Civil society and trade unions continue to provide important support services to migrant workers, and there have been successful instances of reparation of recruitment costs. Nevertheless, there's instances in which migrants' rights are compromised, particularly in regard to low-wage migrant workers on temporary pathways. There is a gap between legislation and enforcement that endures. The challenges in fair recruitment can be addressed through effective enforcement of labor and immigration laws, bilateral agreements, and MOUs with the participation of social partners and CSOs. In the countries of destination, countries could do more to address restrictive sponsorship requirements. On decent work, recruitment reform must be accompanied by decent working conditions for migrant workers. And in this regard, I'm pleased to share that 14 Asia-Pacific countries have ratified one or more of the ILO core conventions and protocols since 2020. We also have additional countries who have ratified the Forced Labor Convention, 7 countries who have ratified the protocol to the Forced Labor Convention. The pandemic has also catalyzed efforts to improve care systems, such as a global alliance on care. It was also brought up in the International Labor Conference general discussion on care economy and care work. Considering gender dynamics and persisting inequalities in the region, it's critical to ensure gender perspectives are mainstreamed into migration strategy and frameworks at national and regional
Distinguished
levels.
representative, please.
Yes, and just in closing, partnerships, including among governments, employers, workers, civil society, and other stakeholders remain vital to meeting these challenges. We are very pleased to be proud of the Executive Committee of the UN Network of Migration and feel that the network has a very important role to play in the achievement of migrants' rights and fair migration for Asia and the Pacific.
Thank you, the distinguished representative of ILO, for that statement. ILO will be followed by UN Women, and next would be BWI. UN Women, please. Do we have the UN Women representative in the room? If that is not the case, then can we hear from Building and Woodworkers International, BWI?
Yes, sir. Chair. Esteemed member of the States, migration should be a choice, not a necessity, driven by crisis or lack of opportunity. Millions are forced to leave their homes due to poverty, climate disasters, irregularity, and conflicts. Unaddressed, root causes compel workers to unsafe migration pathways and precarious jobs, where they face exploitation, forced labor, and abuse. Addressing these systematic drivers is fundamental to ensuring safe, orderly, and regular migration. We demand the government to implement just transition measures to ensure decent work in low-carbon economies and strengthen resilience in frontline communities. Allocate funds for climate adaptation, disaster recovery, and resilience building. Invest in quality, universal public services and quality education, and rebuild social organization of care to reduce vulnerabilities. Combat corruption, improve governance, and achieve universal social protection. Ensure development aid is used to tighten borders and enforcement of returns and undermining human rights. The ability to organize and collective bargaining is essential for workers to address inequality, exploitation, and unsafe conditions. Yet, many migrant workers are denied these fundamental rights due to restrictive laws, abusive employers' practices, and fear of retaliation. Guaranteeing these rights enable migrant workers to advance their rights and protect their interests, to counter workplace imbalances and reverse entrenched pattern of discrimination while strengthening economies and democratic institutions. In this regard, we call government to ratify and implement Conventions 87, 98, remove formal and informal barriers for migrant workers to organize themselves regardless of their migration status. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you, the distinguished representative of BWI. I understand the representative of UN Women is now present in the room, so we shall be hearing from her. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and apologies, I was delayed. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and dear colleagues, it's an honor for UN Women to contribute to the second regional review of the Global Compact on Migration. Migration is an important feature of our globalized and rapidly changing world. It is transformative force and cornerstone of sustainable development, particularly within this dynamic and diverse region such as Asia Pacific. Women represent nearly half of all migrants in this region. Many work in highly gendered, low-paid, informal, and undervalued sectors, such as domestic and care work. Women migrant workers' contributions are essential to the economic and social development of countries of origin, transit, and destination. However, many face gender-based discrimination, such as bans on emigration to certain jobs, age limits, or the need to get permission to migrate, therefore limiting their opportunities to safe and regular migration. Limited agency and decision-making power can push them into irregular migration, trafficking, gender-based violence, as well as exploitation. Evidence shows that gender-responsive policies and programs are critical in order to respond to these issues. To enhance gender-responsive implementation of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, Regular Migration, UN Women urges member states in the Asia-Pacific region to advance the following. And I will have 4 quick points. Eliminating gender-based discriminatory restrictions on migration, ensuring adequate gender-specific essential services and support for all migrants at all stages of migration, increasing the collection and use of gender data on migration to increase evidence-based and gender-responsive policy and program development, involving migrant women and girls and their representatives in policymaking processes that affect them. Excellencies, a truly gender-responsive migration governance is not only the right thing to do, but it is fundamental to build inclusive and sustainable economies in the times of global demographic and economic transformations and climate change. UN Women is committed to continuing its effort to support member states and other stakeholders in further implementation of the Global Compact for Migration. Together, we can realize the world where all can have a choice to migrate safely and with dignity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, distinguished representative of UN Women, for that statement. We have no other international organization or UN entities requesting for the floor. We have already started hearing from our stakeholders with BWI. The next speaker would be ASEAN Trade Union Council.
Thank you, Chair. This statement carries the voice of 19.8 million ASEAN Trade Union Council or ASEAN TUC members, including migrant workers across Southeast Asia. Migrant workers build our cities, care for families, and sustain industries. Yet, they remain among the most exploited. Many are barred from joining unions, denied collective bargaining, and silenced through intimidation and restrictive policies. Without the ability to stand together, they are left defenseless against wage theft, unsafe conditions, and forced labor. Employer-tied visas deepen their suffering, binding workers to abusive employers and stripping them of the right to seek fair treatment. Women in domestic and informal work face long hours, wage and gender-based discrimination, and exclusion from Social Security and maternity benefits. Meanwhile, climate-driven migration forces workers into low-paid, hazardous jobs in sectors where protections are weakest. But migrant workers do not need charity. They need rights, rights that they can exercise. When workers can organize, they resolve most workplace issues themselves, freeing governments to focus on essential services. ASEAN-TUC calls for binding agreements, guaranteeing migrant workers the right to form or join unions, bargain collectively, and access equal labor protections. Governments must abolish employer-tied visas, ban worker-paid recruitment fees, and enforce international labor standards. Migrant workers are human beings with dignity. ASEAN-TUC calls for immediate action to uphold migrant workers' rights, workers' right to organize, protect climate-displaced workers, and build a just migration system. Nothing happens unless something moves, and we are all movers here. When we move together, we do justice to the sacrifices and contributions of migrant workers to development. Let's make the GCM the agent of real change. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of ASEAN Trade Council. He would be followed by the representative of International Trade Union Confederation, Asia Pacific, ITUC-AP. ITUC-AP would be followed by Kabar Bhumi. Do we have ITUC-AP in the room, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Shall I?
Please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, distinguished guests here. Dear colleagues, this is SM Fahimuddin Pasha from ITUC, International Trade Union Confederation, representing the world's largest global trade union federation. And we are here to reaffirm our commitment to work together for the betterment, for the cause of migrant workers in terms of the new social contract, which has 6 demands. And what I understand that these 6 demands are in line with the 23 objectives of Global Compact for Migrations. So let me start with these 6 demands. The first is decent work, that includes creation of environmental friendly jobs, including just transition. Colleagues, it is our demand, and we need to work together to make sure that workers who are working, migrant workers, they should get, they are entitled to have decent work, and we have to make sure that they should have environmental friendly jobs, and workers should not get suffer during any climate changes initiatives which we have taken. Friends, the second demands we have, it's workers' rights. When we say workers' rights, in terms for the migrant workers, we have to understand that the foremost demands which we have, it's right to organize, right to form association, right to vote for the migrant workers, right to occupational health and safety, rights to dignified migration, and no recruitment fees. These comes under the rights for the migrant workers, which we are demanding here. Third, which is also very important, and that's the wage. We discussed a lot about wage theft, which is very important. We have to understand that there should not be discrimination on the basis of gender or on the basis of country of the origin. Fourth, which is very important for us, and that's a social protection. We believe that those who are the migrant workers, they are entitled for all kind of social security benefits. We believe and we demand for the Universal Social Protection Fund. Fifth is equality. Friends, we have to understand that whatever the initiatives which we are taking in terms of migration, we should see from the gender transformative way, from the gender lens. We know that during the migration, it is more women workers who are being suffered compared to their male counterparts. So we have to think on that direction, we have to take concrete action in those directions. Colleagues, the last demands we have, it's inclusion. When we say inclusion, we have to make sure that whatever the initiative which we are taking, so all stakeholders should be board on those initiatives. And friends and colleagues, this is not only our demands but commitment from our end that we will work together and we can achieve the objectives of GSM by working on these 6 demands. Thank you very much for listening me patiently.
I thank you, the distinguished representative of ITUC AP. Next on our list is Kabar Bhumi, to be followed by Women's Rehabilitation Center.
Thank you. I'm Karsiun. I'm chairperson of Kabar Bhumi, a grassroots organization that organizes migrant workers, former migrant workers, and their family. We are also member of ABWLD. Jobless and structural problems have forced more than 9 million Indonesian migrant workers to work in various destination countries across sectors. The mode of recruitment is increasingly diverse, including through labor migration, marriage migration, education, and internship. Recruitment is thus why cause various issues ranging from recruitment problem in destination country, and when returning to the country of origin. Based on our experience and research, here are some of our findings. First problem related to the labor migrant. Indonesian migrant workers experience compulsory training in the country of origin and country of destination. Although we have completed the first contract, we are compelled to keep using agency to handle our employment contract. Because of this, we face exorbitant fees, potential forgery, and confiscation of our document, and forced contraception, especially for women migrant workers. Based on our research, 73% of migrant workers who are experiencing document confiscation by recruitment agency are women domestic workers. Meanwhile, more than 84% of migrant workers experience of confiscation personal document, such as passport, employment contract by agent or employer abroad, or collateral for recruitment fee. These documents are often lost by the agency and employer. Because of this, the document, some migrant workers are unable to access government services such as education and social security. Although this is illegal, they have no remedies. Another issue we face is human trafficking. The modes of human trafficking continue to evolve, such through education, drug trafficking, and also marriage migration. Marriage migration is often characterized by trafficking, which is involved human rights violations such as document forgery, social politic discrimination, and psychological and social sexual exploitation, culture shocks, and also social stigma. The stigma and discrimination worsen the condition of the victim of their children upon returning to their hometown, especially if they return with disease such as HIV/AIDS, which cause them to be ostracized and have difficulty reintegrating to their communities. Although the contribution of migrants is significant of our hope to migrating to improve our life, it yet to be achieved, because even though we have been migrating for decades, for money we send is spent for our daily needs, families, for food, education, and health. We call on this Indonesian government and destination country to consistently adhere to international human rights standards, particularly the UN Convention on the Protection of the Right and all migrant workers and their family. First, ensure migrant workers have identity document and legal
Distinguished
document.
representative of Kabar Bhumi,
So,
please, you have to
illegal
conclude.
confiscation and migrant document, and then to make sure how to ensure the right and migrant worker and the migrant workers and their family involved this policy making and monitoring to protect Indonesian migrant workers. As a former female migrant workers who fight for the right of migrant workers and their family, I hope there will be change the national, regional, and international level to ensure the participation grassroots migrant workers and truly address our issue. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Kabar Bhumi. Next on our list is Women's Rehabilitation Center, to be followed by Public Services Labor Independent Confederation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'm Sunita Mainali, representing Women's Rehabilitation Center work in Nepal. Migration is a journey of empowerment. This sentiment was echoed by a returning migrant woman from Nepal during our feminist participatory action research. Remittances plays a crucial role in Nepal's economy, with over 17,000 Nepalis migrating abroad for employment opportunities every day, excluding undocumented migrants, whose number remains unaccounted for. Migrant voices must be heard. Their experiences matters. As a key stakeholders, they have the rights to participate in all stages of migration-related planning and decision-making process. The principle remains clear: nothing about migrants without migrants. Unfortunately, xenophobic attitudes towards migrant workers are escalating, exacerbated by shifts in global political dynamics, where policies threatens to worsen condition of the migrants. In light of these challenges, it is essential to enhance our unity, inclusivity, and assertiveness in protecting migrants' rights. Among migrants, women workers face additional layers of marginalization. Their mobility is restricted. They encounter social stigma, gender-based violence, and they are often excluded from vital information networks. Reintegration upon return is a major challenge, not just only in Nepal, but across the region. Returning migrants are calling for socio-economic reintegration and a shift in traditional narratives. They should not be seen as objects of pity, but as workers who deserve dignity and respect. Achieving meaningful, sustainable reintegration requires an intersectional approach that addresses caste, gender, class, denial of sexual reproductive health rights and services, indigeneity, and ethnic-based discrimination. Moreover, migrant workers must be recognized as a key stakeholders in platforms like Global Compact for Migration Reviews. Grassroots migrant women must have access to understandable information, resources, and decision-making spaces. Migration policies and dialogues must be inclusive, ensuring that migrant workers are at the center of discussion and that impact their lives. Let us commit to build a migrant-centered information center and upholding their rights to participate in sharing migration policies. Now, this is a need of time to respond to the issues of migrant workers from a feminist lens. Women networks, organizations, feminist groups, and migrant networks, we all come together with a notion that migrant rights are human rights. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Warwick. We would now hear from PSLINK, to be followed by Public Services International.
The Asia-Pacific region is facing multiple crises, from economic to climate to care crisis and conflicts. And these crises are driving migration within our region and from our region to other regions. It has been more than 6 years since the adoption of the GCM, and yet our migrants continue to be discriminated, trafficked, and exploited. Migrant care workers, in particular, such as domestic workers, caregivers, nurses, teachers, majority of whom are women, are vulnerable to abuse and violence, but often excluded from labor protections. In many countries, migrant workers are denied their fundamental right to freedom of association. And without the right to organize, migrant workers experience more vulnerability and oppression without the power to improve their working and living conditions. As public sector labor unions committed to fighting for workers' rights for everyone, regardless of gender, age, ethnicity, migration status, our organization, Public Services Labor Independent Confederation, an affiliate of Public Services International, calls on governments to intensify efforts in aligning national policies, programs, and practices with GCM objectives, and ratifying and implementing international human and labor conventions. Governments should ensure fair and ethical recruitment, implement transparent, rights-based, and gender-responsive bilateral and multilateral labor migration agreements with the meaningful participation of unions, and ensure that no recruitment fees and other related costs should be charged to migrant workers. We call on governments to address structural drivers, including the lack of decent work and growing economic, social, and gender inequalities as a consequence of neoliberal and patriarchal systems that exploit labor and the planet for profit, worsen marginalization of migrant workers, women, indigenous people, informal workers, youth, and persons with disabilities, and force people to migrate out of necessity, not out of choice. We call on governments to stop privatization of public services, such as recruitment and border control, and to reverse state disengagement in migration and refugee services. Governments should ensure access of migrants to public services and guarantee firewall protections for undocumented migrants. Now, more than ever, we need governments to do their duty and allocate adequate resources to address structural drivers of migration, develop their own national and subnational economies, create decent jobs, ensure just transition, enforce labor standards, provide social protection and quality public services, including education, health, and care, and ensure open, participatory, and inclusive governance. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of PSL-INK for that statement. We will now hear from Public Services International, PSI, to be followed by Public Interest Law Center. PSI, please.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable delegates, Public Services International appreciates the opportunity to address you on behalf of over 14 million health workers in 700 health and care sector unions worldwide who are affiliated to PSI, many of whom are migrants. The key message we want to leave you with today is that the single most important factor that protects migrant health workers' rights at destination, that builds better public health systems and provides better public health outcomes, and also that welcomes health workers back home to good jobs, is a unionized health workforce. Unions that are inclusive of migrant workers are the best protection against the many human rights violations we are discussing today at this meeting. In the health sector, unionized workforces have also lower infection rates, lower mortality. They increase worker-to-patient ratios, provide better training, and increase investments in public health systems, all life-changing outcomes for migrant workers and the public you serve. Unions also play important roles in improving labor migration agreements. They not only get better outcomes for workers, but also better provisions for public health systems in origin countries. We know that there has been a mushrooming of labor migration agreements relating to the health workforce. Most of these agreements are developed and implemented without consultation and active participation of trade unions and the migrant workers themselves. While PSI strongly advocates for government-to-government labor migration agreements for recruitment of health and care workers, we also demand these agreements are developed, implemented, and monitored with active participation and decision-making of workers and their unions. We have good examples of where union participation has benefited all involved. For example, working with the Philippines Department of Migrant Workers and monitoring the agreement between Philippines and Germany. As you continue your deliberations and prepare for the IMRF 2026, we call on member states committed to advancing the rights of migrant workers to guarantee their right to organize and to involve trade unions in the design and review of any future labor migration agreements, policies, or processes. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished representative of PSI. We shall now hear from Public Interest Law Center, to be followed by World Vision International.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates and representative of the CSOs, I represent Public Interest Law Center of the Maldives. I would like to highlight some important issues affecting all migrants in this region. First, migrant workers' right to organize, associate, and assemble must be upheld. Their effective participation in everything that affects them from local to international level is essential. Freedom of association is a fundamental right, not a privilege. Second, social protection right for all regardless of their migrant status. Migrants deserve access to social security and health care. Countries of destination should include migrant workers in their social protection programs. Third, expanding regular migration pathways is critical. This will reduce irregular migration and associated risk of exploitations. Fourth, access to justice is vital. Migrant workers must have effective legal resources against rights of violations. This requires strengthened legal aid and accessible complaint mechanisms. Fifth, detaining irregular migrants solely for their status is unacceptable. We must not detain migrant workers solely for being an irregular migrant. We should firmly reject all forms of detention of irregular migrant workers. Sixth, employers' tied visas create dependency and vulnerability. We must dismantle this system, empowering migrant workers to change jobs freely. Facilitating job mobility is crucial for protecting their rights. Finally, wage theft is a prevalent for injustice. We need stronger prevention mechanisms, robust labor inspections, and accessible complaint system. Legal support must be readily available for affected workers. These challenges are complex but solvable. By working together, recommitting to the Global Compact, and prioritizing migrant rights and well-being, we can create a future where migration is truly safe, orderly, and regular for all. I call upon all delegates to pledge for this. Thank you.
I thank you, distinguished representative of Public Interest Law Center. We shall now hear from World Vision International, to be followed by National Indigenous Women Forum.
Thank you, Chair. I speak today on behalf of children whose voices are too often missing in migration discussions. In advance of this second Asia-Pacific review of the GCM, World Vision has consulted 69 children across 10 countries in the Asia-Pacific to understand their experiences and priorities. Their stories of resilience, hardship, and hope must inform our actions. Children told us migration impacts their education, family life, and access to basic rights. Many are left behind when parents migrate for work, struggling with loneliness and disrupted schooling. Others move with their families only to face new barriers, language challenges, legal identity issues, and exclusion from services. Refugee children in particular described the trauma of displacement and the struggle to access education and healthcare. They have clear recommendations. Firstly, make birth and identity registration accessible, digital, and free, so no child is invisible. Number 2, link civil registration with health and education systems, ensuring all children can enrol in school and receive medical care. Number 3, protect migrant and stateless children so they have rights regardless of their parents' status. These are simple but urgent steps. Every child has a right to an identity and a future. We must listen to them and act. Thank you.
I thank you, distinguished representative from World Vision International. Next on our list is National Indigenous Women Forum, to be followed by Philippines Migrants' Rights Watch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, I am Ladip Makirati from the National Indigenous Women Forum. I represent women from a marginalized indigenous group in Nepal, where labor migration is a reality for nearly every household. Globally, indigenous worldviews, cultures, and traditions are highly valued in conversations about climate adaptation and sustainable development. Yet, when it comes to migration, these perspectives are almost entirely ignored. Migration is treated as a separate issue, detached from the systemic marginalization indigenous peoples face, compelling many into unsafe and forced labor conditions. Indigenous migrant workers, especially women and gender diverse migrants, experience deep-rooted discrimination at every stage of migration. When working abroad, indigenous women have to face cultural stigma, irregular salaries, exploitation, and unpaid wages, which are exacerbated by illiteracy. They face discrimination upon their return to their country of origin as well. Perception of indigenous women being considered as innocent and less educated contributes to vulnerability to scams, risky situations, and trafficking in the process of migration. Limited education has rendered indigenous women less aware of their rights, potentially making them more susceptible to violence. The Global Compact for Migration must bridge this gap by recognizing indigenous women and peoples as right holders, ensuring inclusive migration policies that protect our dignity, identity, and well-being. The GCM must set indicators which are able to measure the impact of the GCM on indigenous migrants, and specifically indigenous women migrants. These indicators must be set by indigenous women migrants themselves, and their participation is crucial. Thank you.
I thank you, distinguished representative of NIWF. Now we shall hear from Philippines Migrants' Rights Watch, to be followed by Nepal Trade Union Congress.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chair.
Sorry, first we take Philippines Migrants' Rights Watch, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished guests, CSOs, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. In the Philippines, we ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of Migrants and Members of their Families in 1995. And this year was the execution of Flor Contemplacion in Singapore. So during that time, local law was passed in compliance with the UN Convention. And since then, there was another law in 2011 to amend the 1995 law for migrant workers. And in 2021, another law was passed, 11641, which is the creation of the Department of Migrant Workers. In all these laws, this provision is provided. The state does not promote overseas employment as a means to economic growth and national development, and shall continuously aim to make it a choice and not a necessity. It also provided the state shall institute measures that will strengthen the domestic labor market for the effective reintegration of overseas Filipino workers. And since then, we have been sending more and more migrant workers, because the local laws are not properly implemented, shall we say, and then the social cost of migration should be considered by the government and not the remittances only. So the implementation of local laws should be reviewed, and of course the laws are good on paper, but I think the implementation should be reviewed. And last year, it was the 50 years of the labor employment, which should have been like a stopgap measure. So this is now the 51st year. So, and at the same time, the government should also look into the benefits of our medical personnel, because especially during the COVID, they were the front liners, and then they were promised several benefits, but until today, a lot of them did not receive these benefits, and this pushed them to, look employment overseas, making it for us in the Philippines to have fewer medical personnel. So the health situation of our own countrymen are at stake, and we always look into the needs of other countries to send our migrant workers. So we hope this would be looked into by our government and other governments in the destination countries. Thank you.
Thank you. I thank the distinguished representative of Philippines Migrants' Rights Watch. There is a request for right to reply, perhaps, from the delegation of Philippines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is also to complement what my colleague Carmelita Nuki said of the Philippine Migrants Watch. We have no constitutional obligation to apply.
Sorry, can you pause for a second? Sorry, sir, it's my bad. The Secretariat has clarified that the right of reply has to come at the end of this statement, so can you please wait for a while?
Okay, no problem.
We will revert to you.
Thank you.
So the Nepal Trade Union Congress was waiting. We would now hear from them, to be followed by KCTU.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I am the Secretary General of Nepal Trade Union Congress, Nepal, which is the largest and oldest trade union national center in Nepal. Trade unions in Nepal are active in supporting Nepali workers abroad, their families in Nepal, and those returning home, guided by the principles of social justice, solidarity, and international labor standards. We advocate for stronger legal protections, enhanced pre-departure preparations, and improved support services for migrant workers, both overseas and returning. Many Nepali workers go abroad not out of choice, but because adverse drivers and structural factors compel them to migrate. These need to be addressed by creating decent work opportunities, combating climate change, ensuring respect for human rights, and achieving universal social protection and living wages. In terms of pathways for migration, we need to see collaboration between origin countries to ensure that bilateral agreements with the same destination countries do not undermine the rights and protection of migrant workers from any origin country. Involvement of trade unions representing migrant workers and migrant communities in the design, implementation, and regular monitoring of labor migration pathways is key to prevent such pressure on labor standards and to ensure migrant workers' rights are protected. Nepal's regulated immigration regime has continuously limited women's ability to access foreign employment on equal terms with men, pushing them towards irregular channels. Lacking equal access to insurance, pre-departure training, and consular support, women migrant workers face worse working conditions and greater risks compared to men. Nepal's government must ensure equal access to labor migration for Nepali women and implement targeted programs in collaboration with trade unions and other stakeholders to support Nepali women working abroad in an irregular migration situation. We also call to Nepalese government to monitor recruitment agencies and intermediaries to prevent abusive and fraudulent recruitment practices. Invest in skills development and skills recognition to enhance Nepali workers' employability and earning potential. Facilitate the portability of social security benefits through agreements with destination countries and ratify and implement key ILO conventions. As a GCM champion country, Nepal should enhance the involvement of non-state actors, particularly trade unions, in GCM implementation efforts. We as the labor movement in Nepal stand ready to work together to protect and fulfill rights of all workers, including migrants. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished representative of NTUC. We shall now hear from KCTU affiliated to ITUC-AP.
Thank you, Chair. I am speaking on behalf of the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, which represent more than 1.2 million workers, including migrant workers, who are not only members of trade unions, but also leaders. Trade unions are working to promote rights of migrant workers through counseling, labor rights education, union member socialization activities, and advocacy and campaigns, including mass assemblies, to improve labor migration system. South Korea increasingly relies on migrants to boost the workforce and sustain economic productivity in response to an aging and shrinking population of 51.75 million people. However, the lack of adequate safeguards has placed many migrant workers, especially seasonal migrant workers, in vulnerable positions, exposing them to their living conditions and exploitation, including conditions akin to forced labor in some cases. To eliminate this vulnerability and ensure protection of all migrant workers' rights, trade unions in South Korea call on the government to adopt a whole society and whole government approach in development of labor migration pathway and ensure trade unions from both South Korea and countries of origin are involved in the design and implementation of these pathways, such as the employment permit system, the seasonal worker program, and skilled workers program, and migrant fisher programs. Include provisions in labor migration schemes that enable trade unions to conduct pre-departure and post-arrival trainings to ensure migrant workers are well informed about their rights and responsibilities. Give the Ministry of Employment of Labor responsibility of labor migration program, including the seasonal workers program, to achieve coherence between migration and the labor policies and ensure that labor inspection and labor rights protection measures can be implemented for migrant workers. Establish a review board for labor migration programs that include trade unions to periodically review the programs, monitor and address any violation of the rights and welfare of the migrant workers, and ensure that their rights are protected throughout their employment. As a matter of urgency, set up such a rights review board for the pilot project introducing Filipino caregivers to South Korea under the EPS. Ensure regular inspection of migrants' housing facilities together with trade union representatives to ensure they meet international housing standards. Prioritize the development of regularization programs for undocumented migrants that nurture their skills and experience instead of conducting apprehension or deportation campaigns. Ratify and implement international labor standard and the International Convention on the Rights of all Migrant Workers and members of their families. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, distinguished representative of KCTU. We now have Indian Building and Woodworkers Federation, IBWWF.
Yes, myself is Dr. Ramchandra Khuntia. Migration governance must integrate climate, labor, and social policies to address interconnected challenges. Migration policies must reflect the voice of migrant workers and all right holders affected by these interconnected challenges, integrating the ILO tripartite structure of consultation in social dialogue platform where government and workers and employers organizations are represented, enable migrant workers through their trade unions to play an active role in shaping fair migration governance and addressing regional challenges. The ILO leadership and expertise in labor migration policy must be central to this effort. We call upon the government to ensure coherence between the migration, labor, climate policies through the ILO in designing and implementing labor migration governance framework, ratify and implement ILO standards to ensure universal labor protections, institutionalize the social dialogue platform at national and regional level to address labor migration challenges, engage trade unions in negotiating bilateral labor agreement with prioritized workers' rights, promote regional cooperation to address cross-border migration challenges cooperatively, monitor GCM implementation, and ensure accountability of Object 23, transparent implementation, and monitoring are vital to the success of the GCM. Alternative reporting mechanism and genuine stakeholder engagement can strengthen accountability and ensure adherence to the international commitment. We call upon the government to publish detailed progress report, consider and allow civil society and trade unions to submit alternative independent reviews, ensure GCM review provide genuine opportunities for meaningful trade union engagement where the implementation gaps on the ground and the concrete recommendation can be raised and discussed, align national framework with international labor and human standards. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of IBWWF. Is there any other stakeholder organization that wishes to take the floor? We see a hand raised. Methodist Church, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Appreciate the recognition. I'm Reverend Jack Amick. I'm the Director of Global Migration with UMCOR. It's the United Methodist Committee on Relief, which is part of the General Board of Global Ministries of the Methodist Church. UMCOR is the development and humanitarian arm of the Methodist Church. I am delighted to be here and delighted to be a part of this because I always learn new things, and I hope that all of you do too. UMCOR has been pledging to the fund for the last several years because we believe that migrants need to be heard, and we believe as a church that all migrants, regardless of their situation, suffer in one way or another. And our ministry in this world is to try to alleviate some suffering. And in this forum, I find that there's a wonderful opportunity for us to all recognize that everyone here has some concern or care for migrants, or you wouldn't be here. And so what I would encourage all of us to do is to find those nexus, those connection points, and to listen to people and hear where those values are that overlap with your values, because that's the kind of connection that this world needs right now, especially for migrants. We need to come together and work together more to find ways to assist migrants and to assist one another as we help migrants and as we walk with one another. Thanks for listening. Thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Methodist Church. I see another request for the floor, another two requests actually. Can we please see the names if the camera could help us? Can we please request the stakeholder organizations who are willing to take the floor to please register yourselves, to inscribe yourselves with the Secretariat colleagues? So we had a request from
No, it's not.
Meanwhile, we have a pending request from a UN entity. Let us listen to that statement probably. Can I call upon OHCHR, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Migration is an inevitable reality for the states in Asia and the Pacific and the millions of people who move in different ways and with various motivations in and from the region. We are seeing today across the region the urgent need to put in place predictable measures and mechanisms to protect the human rights of migrants and their families. Such pathways are a concrete demonstration of every state's sovereign responsibility to manage its borders in a way that upholds legal obligations and principles of solidarity. Expanding and diversifying human rights and humanitarian pathways is also fully in line with the GCM's objectives and guiding principles. In this region, the UN Human Rights Office has mapped existing legal, policy, or administrative mechanisms that enable regular travel, admission, and stay, and found not only gaps but also promising practices. For example, every state in our study granted wide-ranging residual discretionary powers to government authorities to authorize entry and stay of certain groups of migrants. Such discretionary mechanisms can be an expression of compassion or international cooperation and solidarity and are able to render flexible responses to entry and stay needs. We recall, however, that discretionary decisions should be based on clear and transparent criteria in order to avoid discrimination and abuses of power. Similarly, pathways that enable entry for medical treatment or to study, which are also available in many countries in the region, may permit migrants to realize human rights such as the right to education or the right to health, particularly where the treatment or study is unavailable in the country of origin, or where removal from the host country would cause a breach of these rights. We know that insufficient pathways to regular migration or prohibitive barriers to accessing those do not prevent irregular migrations. What these restrictions do is make the migration cycle more dangerous for the migrant and create conditions of uncertainty for states. They fuel the growth of predatory industries, allow discrimination and power and abuse by actors at borders, and they make the situation of already vulnerable individuals more precarious. We should also be concerned about what these pathways look like, what and whose needs they are responding to. More channels alone will not make a difference in the protection landscape if they are inaccessible or unresponsive or do not address the needs of those who need them. Instead, we urgently call for more and better pathways that underscore our collective commitment to uphold the dignity and human rights of every individual on the move. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of OHCHR. There seems to be another request from a UN entity. Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, please.
Thank you so much, Chair. Excellency and distinguished delegate and ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the FAO, I'm very honored to address this regional meeting. And migration is a transformative force in our region, reshaping livelihood, revitalizing community, but also posing for challenges, demanding for the coordinated and inclusive and forward-looking solution. FAO's mandate is to ensure food security, improve nutrition, and promoting for sustainable agriculture for all. We recognize that many migrants in Asia and the Pacific come from rural areas, where limited livelihood options, environmental degradation, and climate-related disasters can drive people to leave their homes. This is why FAO is committed to support for member states in harnessing the potential of migration as a catalyst for rural development. First, we must address the root cause of distressed migration. By promoting climate-smart agriculture, investing in sustainable farming practice, and improving access to market, we can build resilient rural economies. In doing so, we need only reduce vulnerability to extended shocks, but also create a viable alternative for those who would otherwise feel compelled to migrate. Second, it is crucial to recognize the vital role that migrants play as an agent of development. Migrants bring skills, knowledge, and remittance back to their communities of origin. FAO works to strengthen rural institutions, foster diaspora engagement, and build partnerships that enable more productive investment in agriculture and local businesses. These efforts support the broader objective of the Global Compact on Migration, and when it occurs, contributes to inclusive for the growth and poverty reduction. And finally, collaboration is key. FAO is also very much happy to support for government and regional bodies, civil societies, and the private sector to work together, and also promoting for evidence-based policies. FAO stands ready to support for member states in implementing the Global Compact of Migration in Asia and the Pacific. Together, let us seize this moment to create pathways for safer migration, resilient food system, and sustainable rural development, ensuring that migration is truly a choice, not a necessity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, distinguished representative of FAO. I guess we can revert to the stakeholder organizations who have now inscribed themselves. We shall start with Vanuatu Human Rights Coalition, to be followed by Migrant Forum in Asia.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Anne Pakoa, founder and CEO of the Vanuatu Human Rights Coalition, based in Vanuatu, my beautiful country which has been hit by a devastating 7.5 magnitude of earthquake that took 14 lives and hundreds of thousands are displaced. I acknowledge that the statements and other deliberations made by previous speakers, particularly the CSO's convening yesterday. Your Excellency, as we all know, women occupy the highest position in global migration records. Sexual exploitation also remains high in the global record. This shows that women are prone to increased future human rights abuses and discrimination, of which these may be fatal. As always, women occupy the prime role in ensuring family, food, and livelihoods before, during, and after disasters. The Pacific women face extreme hardships imposed by climate change impacts and the natural disasters that challenge their human rights and dignity. Therefore, this has given us all the more reason to urge member states for the engagement and advancement, the promotion and significance, safety and the protection of women of women of the world, despite their race, color, nationality, culture, or religious background. Your Excellencies, women migrants' human rights must be supported by workable laws, regulations, and policies. On this note, sir, I urge that the Vanuatu and the rest of the Pacific women have access to regular migration opportunities, not only in the Pacific region, but in Asia region and the regions of the world. That funding opportunities are made available and accessible for our Pacific civil society cohorts to promote and provide direct support to women migrants and local communities working to ensure social protection for the Pacific women. That there are visa-friendly processes that are made available and accessible for women for the Asia Pacific and the rest of the regions of the world. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Vanuatu Human Rights Coalition. We shall now hear from Migrant Forum in Asia, to be followed by TKTMS.
Good afternoon. My name is Lorena Macabuag. I'm from Migrant Forum in Asia. Thank you for this opportunity to give our message. I will focus my message on labor rights issues of migrant workers and our recommendations in relation to next steps and moving forward in the lead up to the 2026 IMRF. Migration in the Asia region is predominantly labor migration, and we know that migrant workers, there have been conversations in the Stakeholders Forum yesterday, in today's discussions also on issues of migrant workers in relation to labor migration. Migrants in both destination and origin countries have limited access to join and form labor unions. This is a precondition for achieving decent work for migrant workers, and we hope that migrant workers in Asia Pacific region will be allowed to form and join their trade unions. We recommend for governments to guarantee, enable, and support the right to organize, form associations, recognize migrant workers' organizations, groups, and unions especially in countries of destination. Social protection is also a key issue in the region. Social protection is a basic human right for all. We recommend for governments to ensure migrant workers are covered by and have access to social protection and service in countries of destination and origin. In relation to moving forward on next steps for the 2026 IMRF, we hope that we recommend for governments to include stakeholders in the national implementation plans of the GCM, and governments to commit to engaging civil society, trade unions, and migrants groups in preparing for the national reports of the IMRF 2026. We also hope that collaboration with unions and civil society through national migration networks can be enhanced, and engagement with the UN Network on Migration. We also recommend that for greater alignment between GCM objectives and SDG goals in the implementation of programs in relation to the GCM. Thank you very much.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Migrant Forum in Asia. We shall now hear from Tamizaga Katida Tozilalar Madhya Sangam, TKTMS, to be followed by Human Rights Commission of the Maldives. TKTMS, please.
Thank you, Chair. I am Pun Kumar from India, representing TKTMS, a trade union affiliated with the BWI. A right-based migration pathway that integrate worker into formal labor market are essential for ensuring dignity and economic security. Regularization program and inclusive policy can unlock migrant workers' contribution to host economics while safeguarding their rights and well-being. We call on government to promote right-based regularization program to replace exploitative temporary or circular migration model and bring undocumented migrants into formal labor market, enhancing their right and economic contribution. End employer-tied visa schemes and ensure workers' mobility, family reunification, and pathway to permanent residence and citizenship, particularly for low-income migrant workers. Scale up regular and gender-sensitive migration channels and humanitarian resettlement for refugee resettlement as an integral part of safe migration framework. Ensure fair recruitment practices is crucial to safeguard the dignity and rights of migrant workers globally, especially the most vulnerable who are disproportionately harmed by these practices. We call on government to ban recruitment fees and enforce employer-paid recruitment cost. Regulate recruitment agencies and temporary employment agencies through enforceable mechanism with the ILO general principles and operational guidelines on fair recruitment. Impose strict penalties for unethical recruitment practices and ensure accountability for violation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, distinguished representative of TKTMS. We shall now hear from Human Rights Commission of the Maldives.
Thank you so much. My name is Momina. Excellencies, thank you for giving this opportunity. Large number of migrant workers living in the Maldives are there, and 1/3 of the population consists of migrant workers. There are a large number of migrant workers undocumented or unregistered. Issues are many. While the government is making effort to improve the condition of migrant workers, we believe that there are several challenges to address the issues, and yet there are many works to be done.
To address these issues, I call upon the state to include and make an inclusive legal framework and ratify the UN International Convention on Migrant Workers. Adopt a law to address the issues of migrant workers while we are making the effort to sign the International Convention. Also, please include the law on occupation, health, and safety. Furthermore, strengthen the social protection for the migrant workers regardless of their employment status. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished representative of the Human Rights Commission of the Maldives, distinguished delegate of the Philippines. We have kept you waiting, but I understand that you want to make a statement, not as such a right to reply.
Thank you, distinguished chair. Thank you, colleagues. This is to complement what my colleague Carmelita Nuki of Philippine Migrants Watch said. The laws are already in place. The implementation is on the ground, and we have enough mechanisms to implement our laws. We have no constitutional obligation in the Philippines to supply the world with quality workers. Migration has always been a choice, but that choice was made stark starting in 1973 when the oil crisis hit our shores, forcing the father of our current president, Ferdinand Marcos Sr., through Minister of Labor Blas Ople, to institute a series of policy decisions that would protect the rights and interests of our then overseas contract workers, or OCWs. Many of us Filipinos have had relatives who were one of those pioneers. It was their decision out of a sense of obligation for their families, and I feel very proud to be a Filipino at this forum, having heard many of my fellow Filipinos speak on behalf of CSOs. Now, I will call on recipient destination countries to please treat Filipino migrants fairly and with justice. They are not an inexhaustible supply in this, what we would like to call a supplier-driven human resources global economy. So the supplier drives the prices, drives the actual supply, and drives the spigot from which the supply flows, like water. So migration would benefit all if all sign and ratify the Migrant Workers Convention, still languishing after all these years. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, distinguished representative of the Philippines. We have no other request for the floor on our list. If there is no other delegation that wishes to take the floor, then distinguished delegates, we have successfully deliberated upon agenda item 2, and I thank you all for your contributions. We believe that all of us together have effectively reviewed the progress made towards the implementation of the Global Compact for Migration in Asia and the Pacific. We have identified good practices, lessons learned, emerging issues, and most importantly, the remaining pressing challenges. We have also identified several regional practices to accelerate implementation of the GCM. Many of the areas requiring further work remain especially relevant in the context of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. On behalf of the Bureau, I call upon all delegations to continue their efforts towards the implementation of the GCM. So tomorrow, we will return to this room at 9 hours and begin deliberations under agenda item 3 on the thematic discussions on progress and challenges with regard to implementing the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration at all levels with due respect to its cross-cutting and independent guiding principles. Meanwhile, I ask all delegations to please check their names on the meeting's website so they can be correctly reflected in the procedural report of the meeting. Please indicate any discrepancies to the Secretariat by 5th February, noon at the latest. I repeat, 5th of February, noon at the latest. I would now like to invite the Secretary of the meeting, to make some housekeeping announcements, please.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, before leaving the room, please ensure that your valuables and personal belongings are with you. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. The meeting will resume at 9 a.m. sharp here in ESCAP Hall. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Secretary. So the meeting is now adjourned.